Guys, Durin has finally entered beta, one of the most anticipated characters from a lore standpoint because we've known about him since 1.0 pretty much, although in a slightly different form. Today I'll take a look at his kit to tell you what kind of character he is and how good he's looking to be at the moment. First of all, Durin is a Pyro's Ward 5-star and he seems to be mostly focused on dealing damage. As a result, his attack stat is rather high and he has a crit damage ascension stat. Specifically, Durin's archetype is that of an off-field sub-DPS, a role that has pretty much been taken over by Mavuika in the past year. Mavuika is, however, a main carry first and foremost, and in many cases if you have to use her as a sub-DPS, then it ends up being kind of suboptimal for her. So her potentially being replaced in this role can be a good thing for many accounts. The other competitor is Xiangling, whose main niche is about teams who need fast pyro application, since she's much better than Mavuika in that sense, and we'll see how Durin stacks up to her as well. Speaking of fast, I want to talk to you about Asphalt Legends, which is today's sponsor. Asphalt Legends is teaming up with Hololive to bring you a limited time event featuring talent like Takanashi Kiara, Kureiji Oli, Iris, and Erisa Ravencroft. On top of that, you will be able to get 8 exclusive card decals and 1 brand new release card featuring Hololive talent. This event runs from October 16 to November 13. As a baseline, Asphalt Legends is a pretty seasoned and popular free-to-play arcade racing game that is available on all mobile devices, Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo Switch 1 and 2, and is even compatible with Steam Deck. Of course, it features cross-platform across all of these devices. To top it off, Iris is releasing a song and MV about Asphalt, and you'll be able to see that in-game as well. There is really no better time to start playing Asphalt, as during this event you'll experience the amazing, frenetic gameplay of the series, but also getting to enjoy the exclusive Hololive content. Make sure to download the game through the links in the description below. So, as I mentioned, Durin is a sub-DPS, and his capabilities come from a combination of his elemental skill and burst. Primarily, when using his skill, he enters a special state, which changes depending on what you do with him. If you press the elemental skill button again, he will launch an attack similar to a plunge, and will enter the white mode. If you use a normal attack, he will enter the black mode instead. The names are not exactly these, I'm just simplifying things. These modes will then be important when using his elemental burst, which has 2 different functionings. As a baseline, it's an attack that deals some initial damage and then will attack continuously for 20 seconds, every 1.25 seconds, so 16 times in total. If Durin is in his white mode, these attacks will be AoE, on a range that's pretty similar to Llama's elemental skill attacks. When this version of the burst is active, if Burning, Overload, Pyro's Whirl, and Pyro Crystallites are triggered, then Durin will reduce resistance on opponents for the elements involved in those reactions by 20%. As a result, Dendro, Electro, Anemo, Pyro, and Geo are getting buffed. What jumps out here is the absence of Cryo and Hydro, because many people thought that Durin could be a support for characters like Moalani, Grizzly, and Ganyu, but it seems that Hoyoverse has taken a completely different direction with his kit. To be honest, I'm a bit disappointed as well, because the Vape and Melt compositions for these types of characters could have used a dedicated support, but at the same time, I'm not really complaining, because his buffing elements that typically get the short end of the stick, like Anemo and Geo. Meanwhile, the black version of the burst is more straightforward. Instead of launching AoE attacks, the burst will focus on a single target instead, with multipliers that are bigger than in the white version. Additionally, Durin will receive a reaction damage bonus when triggering Vaporize and Melt. So, while it doesn't benefit Hydro and Cryo characters, it will still synergize with those types of teams, although just for his own damage. Durin's elemental burst has a quite hefty cost of 70, but luckily he won't really have much to worry about energy. In fact, his elemental skill restores 33 of his energy on use, and also generates 4 particles on top of that. Thanks to this, more often than not, you won't even have to worry about energy recharge on him. This is not really something new for a sub-DPS, as for example his main competitor, Mavuika, doesn't require energy to use her burst either. I suspect that's the reason they made this burst trivial to use as well, just to not make him look bad in comparison. It is a definite advantage to Xiangling, however, as her issues in that sense are notorious. Before I move on, let me remind you that if you enjoy my content but you haven't subbed yet, please consider doing so because it really makes me notice your support. Overall, Durin will deal quite the damage throughout his rotations. Even in the white mode, in a team where he's not triggering Vape but where he's getting solid buffs, he can easily surpass 400,000 damage damage per rotation, which puts him in range with Mavuika's high fighting spirit in the niche. Of course, Mavuika's value decreases when she doesn't have Natran allies, while Durin's should stay very consistent, which is great. In terms of support, Mavuika's damage bonus is roughly comparable to Durin's resistance reduction effect, so overall these two are very similar. It's worth noting that on some teams, even when used as a sub DPS, Mavuika gets to use some charge attacks on field because there is time for that in the rotation. Generally, Mavuika should have more execution upside than Durin, with a more traditional sub DPS in comparison. Xiangling is notably worse than both in this scenario, partially because her lack of internal cooldowns make her a much better fit for vape compositions than other types of teams. Speaking of application, Durin's elemental burst attacks for 16 times and applies pyro every other hit, so 8 times in total, or once every 2.5 seconds. This is honestly not that great. It's worse than Xiangling, of course, but also worse than Mavuika. It's more similar to Dia. The reason it is this way, in my opinion, is that they want him to easily be able to vape or melt in the black mode, rather than being able to enable vapes for other characters like Nuvillet. In fact, his vape damage is not only higher than Xiangling's, but it's also vastly more flexible, since pretty much any hydro carry, or even many sub DPSs, will be able to make him vape consistently. His melt damage is pretty comparable to Mavuika in a similar scenario, granted you're able to melt all of his hits, which is really impressive since this is a role where Mavuika is literally able to carry teams. Last but not least, Durin has a new special trait, an affinity tag that makes him synergize with other specific characters. This tag is called Accent Circle and is basically attached to all the characters that had something to do with the Accent Circle group, those being Venti, Fischl, Klee, Razor, Mona, Sucrose, and Albedo. When paired with at least one of these characters, the additional effects from his elemental burst will be amplified by 75%, so his resistance reduction effects will increase to 35% and his reaction bonus in the black mode to 70%. The first in particular jumps out, because that's quite a support for a character that deals so much damage. At the moment, however, the Accent Circle cast is a bit bare bones, but if in the future it gets more additions, then this will become a very relevant and consistent part of his kit. There are still some interesting synergies already, but for this video I only want to focus on some of the traditional teams Durin fits well in. For one, he can replace Mavuika on Overload Chevreuse teams with Varese or Colorant. While this is a type of composition where Mavuika can use some charge attacks to inflate her total rotation output, Durin can compete with her pretty evenly and even slightly surpass her as a full send sub DPS. Navia teams, she's not looking too hot even with the addition of Durin, but the latter should be competitive for best in slot in this case, and even for other similar Geo DPSs like Ito, for example. For a character like Kinech, Durin is comparable or better, because his Dendro resistance reduction will benefit even an off-fielder character like Emily on the composition, while Mavuika's supportive effects only benefits the active character. For Mualani is an interesting option, even though it doesn't benefit her damage. The reason is that he just deals enough damage himself to compete with Mavuika here, although this becomes a more relevant factor the higher your investment on Mualani is, since in that case she'd benefit more from other supports. For a composition more focused on Durin's damage, a double Hydro setup with Nuvillet and Furina should work well. This is kind of a safe composition because this core is very strong, but Durin does really nice damage here, kinda comparable to Furina and Nuvillet, which shows his potential quite accurately. So overall, at the moment Durin is looking to be kind of a Mavuika side grade as a sub DPS, although he has potential to get better with the Accent Circle stuff. Honestly, aside from that, he's not really revolutionary, but even as he is, he's pretty damn strong, because competing with Mavuika at high fighting spirit level is no easy feat. And with this, I'm done for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and also go check Asphalt Legends through the links in the description below. Bye bye.